I'll call the meeting to order at 7:02. If you would please, this is the Columbia Heights Public Schools Independent School District 13 Board Meeting for Tuesday, January 13th, 2015. If you would please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, welcome everybody. Lori, would you call the roll, please?
Sure. Nichols?
Here.
Palmer?
Here.
Larkin?
Here.
Landwehr?
Here.
Lewis?
Here.
Meyer? Here.
Thank you. Columbia Heights Public Schools creates worlds of opportunity for every learner in the partnership with supportive small-town communities by challenging all to discover their talents, unleash their potential, and develop tools for lifelong success. The district's core values are community, excellence, collaboration, integrity, respect, courage, and innovation. Next, it's the agenda approval adjustments, announcements, and correspondence. And I'd like to move forward to approve the agenda. Someone make a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Ted,
Second.
second by Lori. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. The announcements, January 19th, Monday, no school, Martin Luther King Jr. holiday. January 20th, Tuesday, 6 p.m., school board work session here in the community room. January 23rd, Friday, no school, district in-service day. January 26th, Monday, no school, district grading day. And January 27th, Tuesday, 7 p.m., regular school board meeting, again here in the community room. And correspondence.
Mr. Chair, members, there's no correspondence at this time.
Okay, thank you. Move on to communication to the board. It's the citizens and employee representatives. At this time, any citizen or employee may briefly address the school board. The board will listen to the brief remarks, ask clarifying questions, and if desired, request that the administration follow up. The board will not take action at this meeting on requests presented at this time. Is there anyone that would like to come forward and address the board? Okay, I don't see anybody that would like to come forward, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. And I need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Lori,
Second.
second by Molly. Should we pause for discussion on this as well? Or do we just move forward?
Just move
Okay, all right. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? That motion carries. And now we move on to, and that was for the minutes of the December 9th board meeting, personnel report and treasurer's report for November 2014. Discussions, reports, information items. This is where we have reports from members of the board. They'll report on board activities since the last regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Education. And we'll warm up, and if you mind starting, Ted?
Sure.
Thank you.
Most of the meetings I've been to have been for WEMAP, West Metro Educational Partnership. As you know, there's been a discussion on the future of WEMAP and quite a bit of discussion. And so just to summarize, right now we're at the point where we're looking at two main options, either transferring the schools to Robbinsdale and downtown school to Minneapolis, which would alleviate the responsibilities for the schools on WEMAP, so WEMAP could focus on what it does best, which is the professional development, equity, training, and providing equity resources. The other option is to, and we'll probably hear more about this today, is to manage the schools, have WEMAP contract out that another district could manage the schools, either Robbinsdale or Minneapolis, and then transfer the schools look at transferring the schools at some point. So we've had a parent listening session on that as part of the PTA at the Fair School. And there's going to be a board meeting tomorrow where we have another hearing and getting extensive input from everybody involved, all the stakeholders. Also attended several Lions meetings and Chamber of Commerce meetings, and looking forward to the Minnesota School Board Association Conference coming up at the end of the week. I plan on being there for most of the time there. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Lori?
Well, the organizational meeting, like everybody else, I guess, last week. And then on Friday, I was at the MSD meeting, which was it was really interesting. Basically, it was pretty well attended. We got to spend some time with our representatives, Bernardi and Lane and Senator Goodwin. And the focus, I guess, of the whole thing was the 2015 legislative platform for AMSD and kind of what the things they're going to be urging the legislature to hopefully work on this year and move forward on. Some of the key things were around funding and facilities and world's best workforce. And I guess some of the key things I took away with, like regarding funding, one of the things they're going to urge work on is to push an increase in funding by 4% per year for the next biennium, and then try to index funding formula to inflation going forward. Another thing that they kind of have on their platform is allowing school boards to renew existing operating referendum at the same level, which is kind of interesting. And then they had some other items around facilities, about expanding the eligibility of alternate facilities programs to all schools. Currently, only 25 districts have access to this funding, and it would mean an additional like $328 per pupil for facilities. And also, they're looking at urging the legislature to do some work on expanding the allowable uses of building lease levy monies, which would be interesting for like 916. So that was kind of the highlights of the things I took away. It was a really nice morning. Got to spend some time with Superintendent Kelly and Director Holmgren, and see what happens in the coming legislature session. That's it.
Thank you. Molly?
Well, in December, I attended the Phase 1 training for the school board for new school board members. So that was in St. Cloud. And then over the last week, I've just attended some things in district. The all-school morning meeting last week at Highland. And then the freshman and varsity boys basketball games last Friday night. And Columbia Academy's orientation last night. And then today I was at the JV girls basketball game.
Okay, thank you. Grant?
I attended the Valley View PTO last Friday, which was pretty nice to see a lot of people active in Valley View. PTO is pretty strong, and a lot of people had some good questions. Nice to see Willie Ford there too. Also, I attended the MSBA in St. Cloud, same as Molly. So, and also I attended the city council meeting last night for the city of Columbia Heights, and it was nice to see some good people getting sworn in with Mayor Peterson and council members Donna Schmidt and John Mergen. So it was a very good meeting. So that's about it.
Thank you. Laura?
Well, of course, I attended the organizational meeting 2 minutes late. I do apologize for that. I still feel guilty. And then I attended 916, the Metro 916, and that is the intermediate school district that helps us meet our special education needs. There was quite a few things on the agenda. One was we're doing a feasibility study on reconfiguration of Capitol View, looking at everything down to the detail, facilities, the structure, the various components like the HVAC, hallway configurations, sprinkler configurations, and they're trying to put together a plan to see whether or not it would be something that it would be feasible to repurpose the school. One of the things that it came away with was, and I do want to pass this out to everybody. I was going to put it in the update, but there's so much here that if you want some information, I can get you copies of it. But it's going to be approximately a 4-month process where they're going to be looking at everything, and they're coming back at every meeting and then showing us what they had done. They got focus groups basically together to discuss how to, if they could design the program in, not being constricted by the space, what would it look like? How would you put this all together? Because the structure of the school right now is really not, there's so much space that's just not usable. And the fact that you can't do a lot of the work without putting in the sprinkler system, and the air handling system is insufficient, and there are all sorts of issues like that. So we're going to get a cost on how much it would cost to do the reconfiguration versus actually just building new. But we have a lot of external costs with the building new, like moving the fiber optic lines, and because there's a lot of the district's infrastructure that is located at that building. It's more of a hub. Okay, so that was one thing. We also had a presentation on the accountability and how the district handles its financings. There's been a lot of stuff in the news recently about mismanagement. And so we got a rundown of exactly how they go through the process and their checks and balance system, which was absolutely wonderful. It was wonderful to see. We also, Carner Blue is actually going to have a study that is done. There's a group that wants to do an occupancy study to find out whether or not Carner Blue is doing everything it's supposed to do and what are the benefits of it and stuff. So we're pretty excited to see what this other entity looking at it will actually take away from it. So that's pretty exciting. We also had a presentation on the University of Minnesota Partnership Program, and this was really, really a neat idea. There's a shortage of special education teachers in the state. They actually even showed us the website and showing that even at this time of the year, there's 75 openings for special education teachers. So the idea was, if someone is working in the special education field and they have a bachelor's degree, any kind of bachelor's degree, and they have the desire, they can actually get their licensure while they're still working. And they can even have loan forgiveness for partial credits. The only requirement is that they work in the field, so they get the hands-on. They have the professors that come out to the location and actually work with them while they are doing their job, which has been very successful. The initial requirement was that at least 20 participants were in this program, and they had 28. And as long as we have 28, there's no liability to any of the districts that are participating in it. So I thought that was really neat. They're looking at maybe expanding that into other areas of need in education. One of the areas right now that they're having some trouble filling spots on are the blind, visually impaired, hard of hearing. Apparently there is a real shortage of that, and District 916 is primary now in being able to provide those services. St. Paul used to do it, and they decided they weren't going to anymore. So now that's being handled by the brunt of it. And since it's such a low incident, finding qualified people are extraordinarily difficult. So anyway, we also got a bump on the Lake Elmo building site. That's going to be, I guess you call it Carner Blue East. I guess there was some changeover in the city council, and they want it built sooner, or otherwise they're just basically we're gonna have to start all over again. So anyway, I will keep everybody filled in on everything else, and then I can pass this around if you're interested in some of the feasibility studies that are in here for the Capitol View Center. So some of the timelines and things like that. So I'll try to keep you informed. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Laura. I also attended the organizational meeting and opportunity to meet with Superintendent Kelly, and I've had a couple conversations with a couple different board members, so thank you for your time and visiting with me. And as with Ted. I'm looking forward to the conference coming up at the end of the week, so that's all I have. And then we would move on to the superintendent's report.
Mr. Chair, members, the very first thing I want to do is update you on the high school visual and performing arts work study seminar that will be taking place in March. Those of you that have been on the board before know that in May, the high school came before the board saying that they would like to take a trip, but they would, and it wouldn't be the traditional art or band trip, but they would like to do something tied to the curriculum. And we're in the final planning stages, so I thought you might want to know a little bit of what the planning actually is. The trip is, of course, to New York City, and the senior visual arts students, the AP students and studio students, will be studying at 3 major museums in New York City: the Met, the Metropolitan, the MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art, and the Cloisters. Their teacher, Diane Scully, has already had a common theme, which will be the human form through the ages. They're also going to be looking at architecture. And what's very cool about what they're doing is that they'll have an opportunity to study at the museum and to take some studio classes, and then also see exhibits in the museums. And they'll see different art through the ages at different museums. Ms. Scully has also found a cathedral that she thinks the kids should scale from the inside. It is a very tall Gothic cathedral, and so they're to bring water bottles and flashlights because they'll be going up the bell towers to look at the architectural design and some of the nuances of that particular part of Gothic art. So totally cool. And the concert band is going to have some very unique opportunities. They'll be taking 3 clinics. The first one will be it will be a Broadway clinic put on by Broadway musicians, and their music has already come, and they're practicing Broadway music, which is the commercial end of the business. And then they will go to the Broadway clinic and get feedback on how their music is progressing. They will also go to the New York Philharmonic, and which is like totally amazing, and do a classical clinic with members of that orchestra. And then they will be going to a college, Hunter College, that's on the island, that will be taking into account the music that they would generally be performing and giving them feedback, sectional feedback and individual soloist feedback on their performances. In addition, all students will attend a Broadway musical, and then they will go to the New York Philharmonic concert one night. And then all students will also visit the 9/11 Museum and Memorial. So it is and the last thing, because we are focused on college and career readiness, there are 4 colleges, and students will have the opportunity to pick 2 out of the 4 and to go out and really spend a half day on each campus. And I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, but I do remember that one would be the Parsons School of Design, and another would be NYU. And I think there are, John, do you remember who the? Okay. And the last one was Fordham, but I think it may have switched. And Pratt. So we're just, and the idea is to give them a variety, but to see what's out there as well. And for instance, if you're doing the Parsons School of Design, you may not decide to go to New York, so it's okay, John. But you might look at something in Minnesota that's similar, but close. So we are still fundraising, and we are still working on the curriculum, and the band kids will be practicing like crazy, and the art students are doing virtual tours of the museums already in preparation for what they're going to see. The mayor was out, I think that was today, yes, this morning, and he was talking to the art students about some other things, and he graciously offered to provide the students with blue and gold polo t-shirts that say Columbia Heights, City of Peace, on them to wear when they are on the trip. So that was pretty cool, and we thank the mayor for that. I also attended the Tri-Metro Governance Board meeting, and as for those of you new to the group, we've been in this league, this conference for a year now, and we were placed there and it's a new group, but it seems to be going very well. And that was one of the things on our meeting that we really reflected on, is should we hold this group in solidarity for another year, or should other schools that are petitioning into the conference be admitted? And what the conference is leaning toward is doing another year of trying to figure out the procedures, the budgets, divisional versus non-divisional play, those kinds of issues, before we expand anything. And so when we did there's surveys that go on at events and from the referees on what sportsmanship's like, what our parents are like, how the students are behaving at the games. And everybody received, it's a 1 to 5 scale, 3 or better in almost all areas. So everybody was very, very happy about that. And we're already reviewing plans for next year, if you can believe it. And actually, they went to 2022 on who was going to be doing some of these activities in advance. So there seems to be a real commitment to hold this conference together. I wanted everyone to know that we've, by law, completed our second round of teacher evaluations for probationary. That was a full day last week, and a lot of work on the part of the directors, the principals, and well, actually the whole management team. I was really glad to attend with Member Meyer the AMSD legislative preview. I thought that, you know, some years we present as the small school and some years other schools present. Superintendent Flaffman from Fridley presented from the small school perspective, and she really was talking about we're not part of the big pool of 20 plus that get the additional dollars to upgrade our buildings, but our buildings are 50 and 60 years old, and we need to be part of that pool as well. I thought she built a really nice case for us. And so that, and then the Spring Lake Park representative, who also sits on the board of 916, stood up and made a case for 916 to also be considered. So I really thought that the legislators that were there, and there was a fair amount of legislators, really heard that fairly well. Director Holmgren and Hennekins and I continue to meet on the levy dollar implementation plan. We do that on Mondays. You'll see that on my schedule, and what we'd like to do is the first board meeting in February, bring that to you and say, this is how it peels out for next year, but we want you to know that we're working on a 5-year and a 10-year plan, because we told the voters that this was our plan, and we want to make sure we're sticking to it. So the academic return on investment team continues to meet. This is our pilot year, for those of you new to the board, on taking a look at our academic programming with a lens of the finances, and are we getting the return on the investment for the programs that we're doing. This is something that is coordinated through 916. It's been a tremendous asset for us as a team. We're a team of 9. We're focusing on AVID this year, and we are going to attend our mini conference. We get homework every month that we have to do, and we're going to attend our mini conference on January 20th to show our work to all the other schools that are participating, of which there are 11 other school districts. So very productive and moving forward. I've had meetings with the school board chair, and I've had both conversations and email exchanges or text exchanges with multiple members, and I want to thank you for your time. And last but not least, Principal Fort sent along a picture to me because he wanted you to know just how classy everybody looked at the Minnesota Futures School Award. And actually, Governor Dayton's office sent it out and signed it, but over here is the president of the University of Minnesota, and then this is Mr. Ryan, who is the president of the Minnesota Business Partnership. And in between, you see our fabulous teachers and, of course, Principal Fort. So I'm just going to pass that along, and then you can take a look at that. Principal Fort said before he hangs it on his wall, he wanted to make sure that you saw it as well. And that concludes my
Thank you, Kathy. Next up, we have information on West Metro Education Program. Board will be presented with information on WEMAP. Presenter will be Superintendent Kelly and Director of Finance and Operations, Bill Holmgren.
You can just call me Chatty Cathy tonight. But as Member Landwehr alluded to it, it really is a big decision-making time at West Metro Education Program. And in your packet on page 22, if you're looking at it, tonight we just wanted to once again talk about this in a public forum. I did email both Grant and Molly and say that I know that they had been at the board meeting, but if they wanted to look at the videotape from the last meeting in December when Keith Lester, Superintendent Lester, was out, that they could use that as background information. WEMAP continues to wrestle with really three major changes. Well, they've been around since 1995. And the first one, as Ted said, is really what is the vision in the future for the direction of the magnet schools? The second one would be what would be the future and direction of WEMAP, what they're calling 3.0? What would that entail, and who would comprise the membership? Because that's the second part of it. At the table, there are Minneapolis routinely about every other year declares they're leaving if we don't do something differently. I mean, that's been around since Dr. Bill Green's days. And right now, they're back in the boat and would like to collaborate. But there are other districts around the table that are saying they don't know if the collaborative is, because it is so big, is really serving the needs of the members within. And there's a big difference between, when you're looking at some of the schools between Eden Prairie and Columbia Heights, Edina and Columbia Heights, and there are some, even just geographically. So that is all remains to be seen. And the third part of all of that is the finances. And what are the financial ramifications on the students and the parents with the schools, and for the district as a whole with the buildings? And then, is it really in anybody's best interest to continue a $1.2 to $1.7 million overage on admin at WEMAP? And can we bear the crush of the facilities, which Bill will talk about in a little bit, if they start rolling that cost back onto the districts, and it would be beyond our control. So in the packet or on your screen in board book, I did put in what Superintendent Lester presented the last time, and I'm not going to insult your intelligence by going over it. He did a beautiful job, and you had great dialogue with him. But as you can see in the first two areas, the regional equity leadership, it is the consensus that they're uncertain if that is a direct service to the mission and vision of WEMAP. And in the fair schools, it was concluded that they're not serving the mission of what they were intended to be. And we have 100,000 students in WEMAP, and we're serving 1% of the population. And that's where a lot of the resources are going. On the other two questions, as far as staff development and cultural collaborative, that has always been yes. It is useful, but it could be stronger, and in some cases, it needs to be different, because the staff development our staff needs is far different than Edina, and people recognize that. And so far, it has been kind of a one-size-fits-all. Student programs is also, should they be expanded, and are they on point? And it seemed to think that, yes, they're on point. Yes, they could be expanded and shared. And so when you look at the board meetings at WEMAP, and Ted will be up to his ears in that, they really, I think, need to decide, because they're on a timeline with their superintendent, what to do with the schools. And I'm hearing that February is going to be a big month.
February 11th.
For making decisions on there, on the schools. And once that's been decided one way or the other, people will decide if they're in or out and what to do with WEMAP 3.0. I wanted to let you know that the superintendents have been meeting since last spring, doing a lot of work, and they've been meeting with attorneys as well on the transfer conveyance, as we call it, of the schools. And I put in on page 25 of board book the resolution that every superintendent within WEMAP signed off on, because I thought you should know as background that this will be given. If it hasn't been, I don't know if you get your packets in advance or not, Ted, but this resolution is there. And there's been a lot of thought from subcommittees on what we should say in it. And we wanted to recognize that really the operation of the fair school on the two campuses in Minneapolis and Robbinsdale has been going since 1995. And when I came in 1998, I know I sat around the table, and we didn't have staff then, so everybody divvied up the work. And the schools, however, were really founded as inter-district magnets that would provide integration, and from Minneapolis to its core and vice versa. as well as be lab schools. And the lab school concept has never gotten off the ground, no matter what has happened, and now you have union contracts that complicate it more so that you don't have the transferability. And our district is so much more diverse than the 70% Caucasian and 30% browns and blacks at the middle school that even the Minnesota Department of Education questions whether we should be sending white students there. So we've had that citation 2 or 3 times from Dr. Parks down at MDE. And MDE has scolded us twice and is saying you probably should be looking for a different collaborative if you're going to continue with this model, because it's not, you're not making the mission of the integration plan. The third area is there's really been significant changes in what they call the landscape since the schools opened, because we've had demographic changes in the district. Since these schools have been open, we've gone from 70% Caucasian and 30% browns and blacks to just the reverse. And other districts like Richfield, Brooklyn Center have as well. And Robbinsdale has been moving. There's been financial constraints, open enrollment has played a part, and the state's new achievement and integration laws are complex and causing issues for the schools and our involvement with them. A big question is really WEMAP the appropriate entity to be operating the fair schools? And around us, there's only been one other collaborative that has had integration schools, and that was the East Metro Integration District. And they finally came to the decision that they needed to be more focused on regional equity, and that they should not be involved in the operation of schools, and they have transferred their schools to the Purpich and to Roseville. And so the other collaboration district never had schools. They just focused, it's Northwest, and they just decided to focus on regional equity and closing the achievement gap. So that's a huge question that superintendents are saying that focuses into our whereas. And the superintendents really feel strongly that the purposes of the schools could be achieved if WEMAP ends its operation and really transfers one back to Minneapolis and the other one back to Robbinsdale to operate with the agreement that they're inter-district schools and that they don't change their inter-district integration magnet status. So when you look at that, Superintendent Lester likes to say different owners, same tenants, shouldn't know the difference. And that is pretty much what Roseville and the Purpich have done with the other 2 schools. Some of that would take legislation because the legislature has created some of the funding mechanisms for these schools. And so if we're going to do that, we would need permission from the legislature. So that's why it's important that some decisions be made on the transfer of these schools, if that's going to happen in February, so that we have time to get down to the legislature to begin speaking before the committee deadlines end, to get bills into legislation and have discussion with the legislature on if we could convey them or not. And so the therefore there is that the superintendents recommend that the Joint Powers Board cease to operate the fair schools and to work to transfer the ownership of the building in Crystal to Robbinsdale and the building in Minneapolis to the Minneapolis Public Schools, and those districts to operate the schools as inter-district integration magnet schools. And if that would fly, we are already preparing what we'd have to do in our own districts for staffing, if there were any staff that wanted to bounce back to home districts. But what happened in Roseville is that everybody liked their jobs and they stayed in Harambe, and they would be welcome to stay there as well. So both Minneapolis and Robbinsdale have said we will take all of them. But if somebody wants to have an option, they could exercise their option to go back to vacancies in other districts as well. So that is what is going to be submitted or has been submitted from the superintendents. It's my understanding that in February the board will be urged to take a vote on this, and that it would be helpful if our boards would indicate to our member what our feelings are about that. So what I have scheduled in conjunction with the chair as agenda items, is that during the work study session our next work study session, we'd talk about this one more time. And then we would probably bring a resolution from our board, take a roll call vote on giving Ted some direction on how we want to go so that he's not out there on a limb all by himself. And bring that so they at least know where Columbia Heights Public Schools stand on it. Superintendent's already weighed in. And that would be at our January 27th meeting. That would all go off to WEMAP, and then they would take that under consideration, and our board rep liaison would know the sentiment of this board. I've also asked, are there any questions on any of that? Some of this is all old news to people, or maybe it's, I'm boring, you're falling asleep. I don't want to belabor the question, but I want to make sure that we get things out. I've also asked Bill to do a little bit on the finances one more time.
Just really quickly, if I could, it's a point of obvious maybe, but all the superintendents all signed off on this.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to say with one caveat, Mark Bonine from Brooklyn Center signed off on one, but we modified it, and then he went in for major surgery. And so he is very ill, and he's in the hospital right now. But he signed off on the original one, and I don't know if his assistant has or not, but he's totally on board. He's just medicated and had surgery this week, so.
Okay.
Will the students be affected at all if the switch happens?
The whole idea was that if we're gonna do this, we have to keep students first. So what we want is to have a soft landing, is what we call for the students. So if they're involved in the schools right now and wanna continue, they should be able to continue and not see any difference. So we're hoping that is the way it goes, and that's the way it went with Harambe. I was just with Superintendent Fine this afternoon from Roseville, and they're in their mid-year of conveyance of that school, and, well, it's been a year and a half, but really for real, Roseville taking them over this year, and it's gone very, very well. Nobody really notices, and I think even I want to say that parents that are involved in the school like the approach that we're using now rather than in past years where we've just thrown it up in the air and said, should we close the schools? So the short answer to that is they shouldn't know the difference. They should get the same program for as long as they want to go there.
From what I recall, it was under the understanding that any of our students that are currently attending, we will continue to pay the tuition. But we are no longer going to be sending any more students if we decide to do this. No new applicants, they would have to apply on their own.
They could open enroll.
They could open enroll.
And that's because there's a tuition piece that goes with this that's pretty major. And so if our integration funds have a question mark on them from MDE saying, we don't think this is what you should be doing, we don't want to lose our integration dollars, which are, if you put it in proportion, about $900,000. So we will continue paying tuition, but we would like to keep our own integration dollars, and so therefore we need to be in compliance with the state. So students could open enroll, and because that would be a designated magnet, they would get bus transportation to there. So again, yeah, but it just wouldn't be the tuition payments we'd be paying. Bill, do you have a few things to say over there on the finance side?
Well, I'll just quickly run through, because I know we do have new board members, so you have an idea of what the tuition is costing and some other pieces that go to WEMAP. Of course, at the beginning of all of our PowerPoints, we put in our mission, which we've talked about already this evening, but we truly are here to give our students the best education that we possibly can through our core values. Now, down at WEMAP, we have like an allotment that we're expected to have so many students go down to WEMAP to the two schools every year, and that's at 36. Right now, we have enrollment in the two schools of 35 students. So we're right on where we're supposed to be, and we pretty much have done that every single year. When we look at what gets sent down with the student, of course, the basic money that we receive on formula goes along with that student. The integration is a piece that is extra that goes down with the student. Of course, they get the gifted and talented piece and the capital, which is always interesting. We've given them our capital dollars every single year, but yet they're talking now that the buildings need a lot of capital improvement, and they don't have enough money. And it looks like, I mean, I can only speculate for sure because I haven't been in their books every single year, but that 217 that we send with should have been used to update the building as we went along. Of course, our referendum dollars go along now, and our equity and the endowment, and of course, even our safe schools money goes down with them. So you can see that we spend about $7,500 a year per student down at WEMAP. So when you look at the dollars that are down to the schools, we're sending about $305,000 in tuition, and the integration piece that goes down is $66,000. So if we make a change, the $66,000 would be available back into our integration budget immediately for the first year that we're out. And the tuition piece would actually be a little bit smaller because they would only be open enrolled, and we wouldn't be sending the extra pieces along. So it gives you an idea of the kind of dollars that are going down in the students. So that kind of a real general sense. It doesn't change our financials a lot, but there is the integration piece that would come back into our integration budget and to service students here in Columbia Heights.
That really concludes what we have, unless you have other questions.
Just one quick question, if I could. I know we're going to talk about this more at the work session next week, but the capital piece that you're talking about, where they're saying they need to make improvements, if they don't have the money and we've already given them, what happens to us? I mean, do they come back? Would they say if they don't convey the schools and it were to stay as is, what?
Well, the ask right now, yeah, if the schools are going to stay intact the way they are, they will be asking us for more capital dollars. I mean, that's the bottom line. The report that they sent out is well over $3 million in capital need. They haven't split that out by school districts, so we don't know exactly what the liability would be towards us, but they certainly are asking for more. Of course, at this point, we haven't agreed to do that, or any school. But there's definitely going to be an issue with capital and maintenance of the buildings in the very near term.
And that would directly affect
That
our
directly affects
financial-
our general fund. So I don't have any other way to collect funds to send.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Just comment on that. My understanding is that right now, we're sending approximately $19 per student of integration money, and they were, the discussion has been to increase that to raise money for capital dollars, and which that money, I understand, is very precious to us,
No.
and that would be the problem.
Yeah, there'd be a direct change in our integration budget. Because again, we have no way to generate the dollars except through the integration
And I would
budget.
just, to put that in proportion, and Ted, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because I did ask what Northwest, what they send in out of their integration budget, to keep the lights on and to support the small staff that they have. They pay $3. So that's, you start looking at that and you're going, wow, that's a lot for overhead, and then you put the buildings on there as well. And I know that Director Burkus was wringing his hands because the staff development has, the way they're recalculating the staff development has put, we're getting less staff development dollars out of our plan because WEMAP is getting more. So it's expensive for us. It's expensive for us, and there probably could be better ways, even taking the schools out of it, if we looked at WEMAP 3.0 and said, what do we really need to charge? Because if other people can do it for less, or almost not at all, we need to be looking at how do we maximize the dollars in this district for our kids.
And I think the sentiment in the other WEMAP Joint Powers board members is the same in other districts, that's too big of a bite, so.
Anybody else have any questions for Bill or for Kathy? Again, we'll be talking about this again next week. at the
Next
work
week
session.
again, and then we'll have to put it to a vote so that Ted is solidly supported when he goes down there.
And that would be in the form of a resolution.
Resolution on the
At our
27th.
board, okay. All right, nobody else has any questions? Thank you, Bill. Oh, you get to stay there though, don't you? I knew that. All right, we're moving on to our action items for the evening, and it's the police liaison contract. And again, Bill will be presenting.
If you remember, our last board meeting, our last technical board meeting back in December, we brought this as an information item, so it's been quite a while since we're coming back to take action on it. But just to quickly cover for our new board members, we have two liaison police officers. We work with the Columbia Heights Police Department, and two officers do work during school hours, one here in the high school and one in the middle school. If you look at the last page of the contract that I put in your packet, you'll see that we actually get a pretty good deal for the dollars that we spend. First of all, we're only charged for the hours that they're actually in the buildings, and then the police department actually pays for half of that. So the dollars that we spend is actually a pretty good deal, and we get very good support and very good coverage from the police department. And again, these dollars are actually also covered by the crime levy that we have in place every year. So these dollars are actually funded in a separate place than just the general fund. The contract itself is the same contract as the year before, except for a 2% increase in the fees. So we haven't changed any wording. It's exactly the same. And like I say, the arrangement has been working out very well between the two members. So I would just need a motion to accept the new contract.
Get a motion to move that forward.
Motion.
Motion by Grant,
I'll second.
second by Ted. Any discussion?
Would you say this continues to help provide a safe environment for our students? in the
It
NCC?
did definitely. Since they've been, well, especially now that we have the one also helping in the middle school, I think it definitely has changed the culture.
And it also assists our DARE program.
Yeah.
And the chief has been very gracious in that not only does he do the two schools that are in Columbia Heights, but he also does North Park, because Fridley does not provide the same service. And he has been nice to rotate the officer through all three buildings. So special thank you to the city of Columbia Heights for being so gracious to our school district.
And I think there's even probably more, not because of this contract necessarily, but certainly the collaboration with the police department and the district with reading at the different schools. The police officers are staff from the police department. They do the basketball on Tuesdays they have, and it's not always a liaison necessarily, that's their supervising. So you start tossing in some of the other stuff that they're doing in collaboration with the district. My personal opinion, it's a pretty good deal. Any other questions, comments, discussion?
Guess I would just say it's a good to know that there's actually an officer on site that can respond. So I like that fact as well.
That's a good point. When there is something that takes place, they're right there. There's not the delay. Excellent. Anybody else? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
All right, and last on the agenda this evening is board topics. Does anybody have any board topics that they'd like to bring up? Laura?
Yeah, the Columbia Academy is having their robotics competition this weekend. I guess I know that some of this, I think they have to be there if the kids have to be there at like 7 a.m. in the morning to help set up. If there's anybody available to help them set up on the Friday night, they have to get ready for the competition. Should run all day. Community members are welcome to go. And family members, get out there and see what these kids are doing, what they're learning. And thanks for all the staff who puts in so much time to do this with the kids. They seem to really enjoy it. So I just wanted to remind everybody that Columbia Academy is having their robotics competition.
Yeah, thank you. Anybody else?
Do we have a listening session scheduled on Tuesday?
We do not. We're gonna have, at the next work session, they're gonna have our conversations about the direction and
Cool.
When we initially talked about it, it was, we're gonna pilot it now, so we're gonna come back and talk about if or how we want to move it forward, so.
Okay.
We'll be looking to set something up hopefully in February if we move forward. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I think there was, I heard there was some concern about the snow, the extremely cold day that was on last Wednesday, whether absences were excused that day, if parents wanted to keep their children home for safety. I'm just curious how that was communicated to the parents, and, you know, I guess it would be important to communicate that ahead of time, so that everybody's clear on how that's going to be handled. And I heard that may not have been communicated as well as it could be.
It wasn't, and it was somewhat by design, and I was just talking to Superintendent from St. Paul School District, and there's the message that you send that we always leave it in the hands of parents to decide if their students should attend school or not. And because we don't want anyone to feel, particularly if it's cold weather or a snow day, that we're forcing people to bring their kids to school, but it's by choice. But when we have the schools open, we would prefer that the students attend. And that really is our stand as administration. We have our set points for when we will close, and last year we proved that we could close 6 times. So when we really think that there is something that we are in jeopardy of for the students, we will just make the decision to close the schools down. And the rest of the time, if we're open, we're trying to signal that come to school is important and our buses are running. If you take the extremely cold weather, you also have to take into account that there was no snow. We have brand new buses that are a year old and that they're running on time. So we really wanted to inkle to people to please come to school, but if they chose not to, we would make the decision to excuse. But our procedure wasn't to just excuse people. We really wanted them to think seriously about coming to school that day because we thought they could make it. And so that's what that is. And it's different when there's a snow day because Bill and I were talking about that again today, and superintendents were talking about that last Friday, is that each community is different, just like it is with the wind chill. But if you can't get the buses through, and if the roads aren't plowed, that might not be an issue for Columbia Heights, and it might be an issue for Minneapolis. And so we're trying to do it situational now, rather than just blanket closings across the area. And as long as I'm talking weather, we have been working as a superintendent group in the metro area since last May with the National Weather Service. And we have an hour-by-hour decision-making grid that we look at to see, and Bill called me at 4:30 in the morning that morning to decide what we really actually were going to do. So Minneapolis had a set point at 35. They only made it to 33, but because they closed the night before, there was no going back. So it's an important decision. We're going to make it judiciously, but it probably will not be made. It'll be situational each time in the early mornings, unless it's so extreme that we know that we can call it the night before. So we're communicating. We would like students here when we're open. That's the message we're trying to send.
Kind of like we're open for business.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I guess the concern is not for parents to feel that they are forced to send their students for safety reasons. And
No, we're not forcing anyone, but yet we are not we're sending a message. We'd really like to have the students here.
Great.
But if a parent feels uncomfortable with that, that's their decision. But our message is, we have the schools open. We think it's safe enough.
Anything else? The only thing I see here, we got our little schedule of performances coming up prior to our next meeting. The one-act play will be held here at the high school, and that's on the 16th at 7 p.m. And the 22nd is the variety show, also held here at the high school. So those are a couple events up here that'll be taking place prior to the next time we get a chance to brag about what our kids are doing in our district. So, anything else? If not, we'll adjourn at 7:57.